Hello and welcome to Heads Up, a year-long mental health awareness journey, Dartmouth Health's webinar series, which focuses on important mental health topics that affect all of us. I'm Audra Burns, your moderator for the series. Today, we will discuss mental health challenges of being a student athlete and ways that parents, schools, coaches, trainers, and others can support them. So I have three really great panelists today joining me. First, we have Dr. Keith Loud. He is Dartmouth Health Children's Physician-in-Chief and a board-certified sports pediatrician. Hi, Dr. Loud.
Good morning, Audra. Good to be here.
Great to have you. We have Dr. Mark Hiatt. He is a staff psychologist and sports psychology program director at Dartmouth College Health Services. Hi, Dr. Hiatt.
Hi, Audra. Good morning. Great to be here.
And finally, we have Meghan Cramb of Merrimack, New Hampshire. She is a graduate student athlete and a member of Lynn University's women's basketball team. Hi, Meghan.
Hi, Audra. It's good to be here.
Great to have all three of you. So the goal for this year-long series is to help change the conversation around mental health and truly end the stigma associated with it. It's not always an easy topic, as we know, to talk about, and especially for student athletes, it can be even more challenging. Athletes are competitive and they strive to meet expectations of themselves, coaches, parents, and others. Admittedly, struggling with mental health is not easy. So I kind of want to give a brief overview about the conversation and a little background to start the conversation with Meghan. So Meghan attended Bishop Girton High School, where she was an honor student and multi-year athlete. She attended Division II Assumption University on full scholarship for basketball, where she had 2 successful seasons before suffering a season-ending ACL injury and surgery in her junior year, and her senior year was canceled because of COVID. She graduated cum laude in May of 2021 in a double major in biology and health science, preclinical, and returned to Assumption the past year as a graduate student to continue playing basketball. Meg will continue her graduate degree studies and fulfill her year of NCAA eligibility at Lynn University in Florida this coming year. So now, Meghan, hearing all that background, I'm sure brings up many memories for you. So you've had quite the experience, obviously some highs and lows over the past year. So what would you say are the unique pressures of being a student athlete?
I think, both high school and college student athletes are always having to perform 110% all the time, while also having to manage their studies and traveling to games, and especially at the college level. I mean, we're practicing 20 hours a week when we're in season, and we're lifting, and we're, having film sessions and pool sessions, and we're on the field or on the court or on the track. So managing all of that while also going to class every single day, being in person, and maintaining a high GPA. I would say that those are like your main pressures, but then also trying to perform for your coaches and for your team. I think that's kind of the biggest thing as a student athlete that you feel all the time.
Yeah, that's certainly a lot of pressure. I know, college alone is a lot to have on your shoulders, and then to have, all those expectations on you to handle. That's great insight from you. I appreciate that. So now I want to turn to you, Keith. How does what Meghan, just described translate to what you're seeing in young patients and their parents?
It's really relevant, and I suspect that Meghan has had she has a lot of insight and perspective on this. I wonder how much of that is related to the injury and the time sort of away from sports. As a sports medicine physician, oftentimes the first experience that athletes have with just how much their identity is wrapped up in being an athlete is when it's taken away from them, when they have a season-ending injury, sometimes career-ending injury, surgical repair like an ACL tear like Meghan had. It really is it's either a wake-up call or really a devastating time. I've cited for a long time an old study from the late 1990s that adolescents will rate the discontinuation or the exclusion from sports participation as among the greatest losses that they could experience, up there with loss of a friend or a family member to death. I mean, this is really a significant source of their identity. And so I see that in the clinical setting when all of a sudden they are no longer they no longer have all those pressures, which Meghan pointed out, which might be seen as a good thing, but in and of itself, that's a stress to be taken away from that milieu and really challenging their identity and how they present themselves. On the other end of the spectrum, I will sometimes see athletes in the clinic whose injuries do not seem to recover as quickly as we or the athletic therapists or others, athletic trainers and physical therapists, might recognize based on sort of healing times and physiology alone. And there's times when I suspect, and it actually comes true, that the injury is a relief for the athlete, that it takes them away from all of those stressors and pressures, and it gives them the opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have had to say, I had enough, this identity and this pressure is too much. So the stakes are quite high, and Meghan elucidated them really nicely.
And I think you bring up an excellent point for our viewers who are parents or caregivers or even athletes themselves who might be watching, the point that so much identity is looped into this, and when that's taken away, the feeling of loss. So if we do know an athlete who's experiencing something like that, that we can be more mindful of what they're truly going through. It's not that they have to sit out on a game and they're sad about it. It's truly impacting how they're feeling and how they're identifying. So thank you for that insight. I hope that our viewers take that away. And let's turn to you now, Dr. Hiatt. What are some of the primary mental health challenges for student athletes at any level, but particularly in high school and college?
Well, I think as Meghan and Keith really did a nice job describing, one of the biggest stressors that high school and certainly collegiate athletes experience is injuries. And sometimes the recovery process can be very long and uncertain. And I put concussions in with that as well, because concussions can kind of even bring their own symptoms together. And it is very much a loss, a grieving process for the loss of the sport. For some athletes, as Keith pointed out too, is there can be some relief too from the pressures, but there's often a lot of loss, anger, and sadness, and to the extent that sport has been tied into their identity, which particularly at the collegiate level and for a lot of high school students, that's been a big part of their lives and a big part of what they've built on since they were young. Other stressors that we see are a lot of transitions from high school and club team to college, particularly at the collegiate level. Students who sometimes had a big role on a high school or club team are adjusting to new roles where they may not be, it may be uncertain that they might even make the team, or transitions that happen when students might in high school shift teams or move to a different club team. We see a lot of, as Meghan talked about, performance pressure. Sometimes that's pressure from coaches or from family, and a lot of times it's internal pressure that impacts them. And sports is often on a stage where they're performing in front of others, family, friends, communities, and there can add to that sense of pressure that's there. There's stress that comes from the transition out of sport, whether that's due to an injury that a student may be sidelined, or through any other kinds of transitions that may happen. Something that's been a big part of themselves is now they're trying to fill that void with something else. It is another kind of stress that we see a lot with student athletes.
I think my takeaway from what you were just talking about is being mindful of what additional pressures we're putting on these student athletes, because they're already feeling it themselves. And we as parents or caregivers, if we're adding to that stress of pressure on them, it's only going to exacerbate what they're dealing with. And so I think we need to remember that, as much as we want to be encouraging and motivating to them and help them through it, there's also that fine line of how much are we truly pushing them and having that awareness. So thank you for that. Now, Meghan, you were hit with a double whammy. You had a season-ending ACL injury, and then COVID hit, during your collegiate season. So let's talk about how that impacted mentally, and how did you cope with that so other athletes might learn something from how you dealt with it?
So starting with my injury, it happened right at the beginning of my junior season. So kind of right away, I knew, I wasn't going to play that whole season. And like Dr. Loud said, it really is like losing your whole identity. Like as much as you go to college, for academics and stuff, like having a scholarship for athletics, that's your job. And so you really, you go through this grieving process. It really, you're sad, you're angry, but then you get happy again, and you're finding yourself, and you're finding new ways to be an athlete still, all while having an injury. So it really is like the grieving process. But like for me, I would have to sit up at practice, and I had to act all happy and stuff when internally I was like so angry I wasn't playing, and I was sad, and I was frustrated and overwhelmed. But your team and your coaches and trainers, they don't see it, unless you actually talk to them. But I mean, I guess the biggest thing, it's really that parents and even athletes can understand is that, if you deal with a very big injury, especially, it really, you lose your identity. And to cope with it the best, I think, is finding little ways and like little milestones. So like for me, it was, when I could bend my knee a certain degree after surgery, and once I could jump again, and then running for the first time. Like you have to set those little milestones, or else I think, the whole process is going to be just really grueling and long, and having those little milestones, I think, really helps to speed it up and keep you focused, and, keep your mental health a little better. And then with COVID, I would say, it was a big thing for all student athletes, because there was a lot of unknown with it. Like we've said for 2 years now, student athletes, lost seasons. I was one of them, but we were practicing all season leading up to it to then lose a season. So dealing with that, I mean, it really is, coaches have to understand that, you're putting these student athletes through practices, but we're not working for anything in particular. So, they have to understand that it's okay to give your student athletes a break. And like for student athletes themselves, it's okay to say like that I'm not okay and I need a break, and hey, can we talk about this, or anything like that. I guess that would be kind of the biggest takeaway from COVID itself that I experienced.
No, that's excellent advice. I think, being able to vocalize when you need the time and you need the support and you need the help. And then I loved how you talked about celebrating the little milestones, because especially with an injury, you're not going to go from 0 to 100, and that's going to stress you out if you're thinking the long game. So I love that advice you just gave of take little baby steps and celebrate those wins. Then you also mentioned something interesting about how you went through, like, you go through the grief process almost with an injury. And I think what you said earlier at the beginning, you mentioned how being a student athlete, you're already elevated on this platform, and the expectations are so high. And so I think it's important for us to remember that, athletes who go through an injury or have a mental health problem where they need to take a break, they need to have that ability to go through a grieving process. And we can't, as supporters or coaches or parents, just be like, come on, get out there, let's go. And recognizing that there is a process that each individual needs to go through. So thank you for sharing that insight. Now, Mark, our friend John Broderick, who is a mental health champion and advocate, he often says that when a student athlete has a broken bone, they receive the care and concern. But if they're struggling mentally, they're afraid to speak up, seek help, or they're expected to push through it. So why is this the case, and how can we encourage them to speak up?
I think it's a great point, Audra. When there's a physical injury, it's often very visible, and so you can see that, and sometimes athletes have felt more comfortable being sidelined in that perspective. I think in sport there is still stigma around seeking help, and kind of a lot of pressure to tough it out. There's been a lot of we're just going to grind it out, and not giving athletes permission to say, hey, I'm not okay. And I think that's shifting. I think we're getting better at that, of opening up, and particularly in recent years and during the pandemic, as Meghan talked about, with a lot of professional athletes coming forward and sort of talking about their own struggles around mental health, depression, anxiety, loss that comes up, and kind of moving away from that stigma that we have to put on a game face, and that we can open up and be open about the struggles that we're experiencing, and that coaches and parents and teammates and we can all be supportive of that and still perform well. And because I think it's hard to perform well consistently if we're not mentally healthy, and that those two go hand in hand. And I think there's a shift that's been happening, but there's still a lot of room to grow with that.
There is a lot of room to grow with that. And hopefully by our viewers just watching this conversation, it's going to initiate those initial conversations. Because what you had just said about, we tell people to put a game face on, that can be almost detrimental at sometimes, because we don't want them just putting a game face on. We want them addressing their concerns and vocalizing their concerns. So before we wrap up, this has been a really great conversation, but I think what I would love to hear from each of you is one key takeaway that you want our viewers to remember from this conversation. Meghan, I'll start with you.
I guess I would say that, for young athletes and college athletes and high school athletes, that what I've learned through my process is that it's okay to say, like, you're not okay and that you need help on different levels other than getting, physical therapy and treatment and stuff like that, and to really prioritize your mental health, because if you don't have great mental health, it's going to be really difficult to perform 100% all the time.
Prioritize your mental health. I love that. All right, Keith, what's your advice?
So, I think it's a really good point about making sure that we support our student athletes, and all students should be athletes, quite frankly. And I think part of what we do, even if we don't say suck it up or tough it out, we put athletes at all levels on such a high pedestal. They put on themselves the pressure to be the role model, because we've said that athletes are role models, and that can be detrimental. And, I sat on a panel with the American Academy of Pediatrics last fall on the professionalization of youth sports. Curbing a crisis is what we called it, because we have burnout, we have careers ended, we have the inability to acknowledge mental health challenges, which these athletes have. And here's the other take home: if we can de-emphasize the sporting aspect as a society and as a family, the evidence is that kids who play in a variety of activities are more likely to achieve elite levels of success than those who specialize early. And that's where the specialization is often where all these pressures come in. So I'll leave viewers with the Aspen Institute's play project, aspenplayproject.org, which talks about sports for all, play for life is the goal.
That's fantastic. And we'll be sure to link to that website that Dr. Loud just mentioned at this video link. So Mark, let's wrap up with you. What advice do you have?
I think to echo what Meghan and Keith are saying, one, for athletes, that it's okay to not be okay and to speak up and support each other. And I think for coaches and parents to provide that same level of support, that athletics can be challenging, but to have the support kind of meet what's going on, and to really emphasize, what Keith was talking about, that it's playing sports. And I think when the professionalization of it, we've lost the play component, and to really make sure, and you can have that at all levels, that it should be fun, there should be involved play, there's challenge and work involved, and that shifts developmentally as athletes get older, but making sure that we're keeping that sense of perspective and play, and focus on the student athlete.
Perspective of play. I think that's great. And I know as a parent of a student athlete, I've had a lot of great takeaway points from here, and I'm going to be very mindful of what additional pressure we as parents might be putting on our child. So I appreciate that. And I hope our viewers have some great takeaways from this. So Meghan, Keith, and Mark, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks you. Thank you very much.
So to view other Heads Up segments and to access additional information and some resource links that are important to this topic, you please visit our website, and we will also have them linked at the bottom of this video. Thank you so much. Stay healthy and stay safe.